Hey everybody, this is Zachary Jeans. Let's keep walking through this Bible. So today is day 271, and I hope you're having a good day. Maybe you're binging these and you're like, yeah, it's the same day. But I don't know. But however you listen, however you get in, whether it's through podcasts, whether it's through YouTube or Rumble, Facebook, whatever, I appreciate you. Thank you for taking time to get in the Word on the regular, and that you keep on walking. That's what we're doing. We're just walking through the Word day by day. Lord willing, we'll get through the New Testament in 365 days. And we'll go on to read the rest of the Bible over the next couple of years. We also I may be starting a live show where there'll be a little more engagement, interaction, and subjects that are biblically related, or maybe subjects that we can look at through the eyes of Scripture, deeper dives, live study, live digs into the Word. So look for that in the future. Thank you. Don't want to forget to say thank you. Thank you so much for hitting that little like button. Thanks for sharing, re-sharing on whatever platform. Thank you for passing it on in a text or an email. Thank you for sending my name up to the Lord through your prayers. Thank you for passing my name in this ministry on to prayer groups. If you have a prayer group at a church, sometimes that they have all kinds of crisis type prayers to pray for, and getting just something that's like, oh, well, here's a ministry I can pray for. That's kind of a little reprieve for their own prayer life if they're a part of one of those church groups. So if you throw my name in there, it can actually be a blessing, not only to me, but also to them. And what else? Oh, and thanks for those who've been buying me a cup of coffee through the support link. And for those that are joining on and becoming members, it just opens up more and more doors for me to do this, which I love. So thank you for your support. Okay, so today we're going to go Hebrews chapter 6. The bulk of our text is going to be verse 13 through 20. But there's some overlap. Yesterday we kind of overlapped today, and today is going to overlap yesterday. So we're going to reference verse 9 through 12, or 13, and we're going to also really focus then in on 14 through 20. All right? So let me get a sip of coffee here. Speaking of coffee. Man, that's good. Okay. All right. So I am going to pick it in verse 9. But again, we're going to focus on verse 13 through 20. Therefore, though we speak in this way, yet in your case, beloved, we feel sure of better things. Remember that yesterday? Things that belong to salvation. For God is not unjust as to overlook your work and the love that you have shown in his name in serving the saints, as you still do. And we desire each one of you to show the same earnestness, to have the full assurance of hope until the end, so that you may not be sluggish, but imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, surely I will bless you and multiply you. And thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their disputes an oath is final for confirmation. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. All right. So yesterday I finished on your full assurance, and I referenced this concept that, hey, he's talking about people walking away from the Lord and how it's like impossible to bring them back. But that's not how we feel about you. It's not how we feel about you. We have assurance about you, and we want you to have assurance about your own walk. So don't be sluggish. Walk the good walk. Follow those who are walking the good walk. And do so until the end. Okay? So, for when God made a promise to Abraham, he had no one greater by whom to swear. He swore by himself. You remember when Jesus, in the Gospel of John, Jesus, well, not just the Gospel of John. He does this in a lot of places, actually. Okay, so they're like, how do we know that you're telling the truth? And he's like, well, my Father testifies of me. God does. But if you need another, look, there's John the Baptist, right? In Hebrews, he's pointing back, or they are pointing back, the author is, to the story of Abraham and his relationship to God and the covenant and the promise. On earth, when we make promises or we sign contracts, even though we're the ones signing it, there are those that are guarantors of that contract. If it's a loan, it's your bank. If it's a loan and your bank needs more security, then they ask for you to sign that with another person, a co-signer, a second witness, essentially, that not only is bearing witness to the fact that you're gonna pay it, but if you don't, they also will. In our passage here, he talks about how on earth, when people make oaths, they swear to something greater. They appeal to something greater. In culture, especially back east, I hear this. You know, people will swear on their mother's grave. Someone who in their family is set apart and holy in the family's eyes, who has passed on, and no one can speak ill of the dead, let alone the mother of the family, the matriarch. So I swear on my mother's grave, right? Appealing to a higher level of honor, someone greater, or to a symbol that is greater than self. Other ways people swear to something that is greater. So they might, especially in Catholic circles, appeal to the authority of an angel or to a saint, somebody who's died with a life that was lived to God in a miraculous and godly, set-apart way. And they might appeal both in prayer and to a saint. Not as the saints in the Bible as it's written, but within the Catholic tradition, sainthood. They might appeal to that individual that they know is alive in heaven, continuing to serve God in their eyes in specific ways. So you have the saint of this and the saint of that. Someone who has a specific service and calling, they believe, in heaven. So you might appeal to a greater authority that way. Some people, especially within the Catholic tradition, pray to ask help of the Mother Mary. They refer to her as the Queen of Heaven, the exalted one, above basically all people, under Christ or next to, akin to Christ, because she's the mother of Christ. So they appeal to the Holy Mother, this one that God said really nice things about right, in the Bible. This one who served a unique and holy purpose. So in Catholic tradition, one would appeal to Mary. Now, I appreciate Mary, I value her, and maybe different than other evangelicals, I don't dismiss her or make little of Mary's life. I think when you get to heaven, Mary, although there will be an impartiality in heaven, there are those who serve the Lord in unique ways, and I think that all of us will appreciate those unique ways that people served and were rewarded in heaven. I think people will honor Mary for who she is. Not in a worshipful way, but in an honoring and appreciation way. Showing reverence and deference for this one that served God that way. But I also think that there will be a lot of situations in heaven like that. I don't think you're going to walk up to Abraham and trash him in heaven for his service and work to God, in believing in God and being the one on which all faith covenant was built, right? I don't think you'll make light of him in his presence. And maybe this concept is fresh and new to your ears, or you haven't thought about it in a while. The people we read about here are alive. So when you talk about them, they aren't dead. They're alive in heaven, in the new earth. And in another sense, if you have real faith, as the timelines merge and we meet God in heaven, and we see people writing about the images that they saw when pulled into that world, into that reality ahead from our point of view. If you truly believe, then you are actually there in the things that John, for instance, is writing about in Revelation. That is real. That is real reality that is going on right now ahead of our timeline. But in a sense, because we're everlasting creations saved by grace for that purpose and time and place going forward, we are in fact there. And so is Abraham, and so is Mary, and all the saints. Okay, so I think it's helpful to remember as we're talking about Melchizedek, or talking about Peter the Apostle, or Abraham here, that we don't trash them, that we think of them as real people, you and I, and remember that we're going to know them forever in heaven, in the new earth. Okay, I digress. For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, surely I will bless you and multiply you. Thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their disputes an oath is final for confirmation. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we have fled for refuge, we might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope that's set before us. In that, we have this whole concept of swearing greater, God not having anyone greater to swear by. God confirmed it with an oath. We also have this little nugget. Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. When you are promised something to be delivered, maybe you're waiting on an Amazon package to be delivered. Maybe you're ordering Christmas stuff and you're waiting on it to be delivered so you can scurry away to a closet and hide it, or tuck it away upstairs in the attic like Chevy Chase did in Christmas Vacation. Maybe you're waiting on a birthday present or a graduation gift from Amazon. The idea is that you're waiting. You've made the purchase, right? You've made the intent, activated the purchase through the click, the action of faith and trust, right? You made the appeal with the effort, And now you're waiting for the fulfillment of that. And then those boxes show up. And you get them. Maybe you're waiting on them. Maybe you've made a promise for marriage and you're waiting for that day. You've made an oath through your request to your spouse to marry them. And they have made an oath to your request to marry you. Or maybe you're flipped around gender-wise on that. Regardless, a promise and request was made, and you're waiting for the fulfillment of that on the day of your marriage. We recently went to our friends, had a house dedication and also a renewal for their vows. They've been married 13 years. And so they knew that they were at a place in their life where they wanted to renew that promise. Not that it was replacing that promise, but they wanted to share that and also share sort of where they're at now in the maturity of their faith. They wanted to have that with the Lord, with people that they know now who didn't maybe all of them know them then. And we got to be a part of that. But there was a time where they put out the Facebook invite, hey, we're going to have this thing. We made this commitment to one another to recommit our lives to one another. And we want to do that in your presence. And we all had to wait. We had to wait for that day. And that opportunity, we had to be patient. We couldn't just show up early and go, oh, here's your, for instance, we had a potluck and we brought pie. We couldn't show up and bring pie 2 weeks earlier, although I'm sure they'd appreciate that. We all love pie. But Heather made awesome apple pie and we brought the pie. It was for that day. Just like everybody else who showed up for that day to see them fulfill that commitment that they had made to one another to renew their vows. Abraham, if you go back and read the passage, and we're going to when we go through the Old Testament, waited for decades, dozens and dozens of years, from the first time he was called from where he lived, basically out by Babylon, Iraq, and hauled himself all the way across the Middle East and ended up in the promised land of Israel. He spent decades listening to the Lord in a few handful very poignant moments where God came and spoke to him and gave him a renewal of this promise and said, hey, it's going to happen this way. You're going to have a son, and it's through him that this promise is going to be fulfilled. You're going to have descendants that are going to outnumber the stars. Children of faith. Through that time, he took his wife's, maidservant, had kids through her, but eventually, he was granted the promise of his son Isaac, and Isaac eventually had Jacob. Jacob's name changed to Israel, and we get Israel and the tribes and so forth. But he had to wait patiently. And at times, even though this passage doesn't imply it, but we read the story, there's a little bit of like, how does this work, Lord? But eventually, the fulfillment came. So we too, we put our faith in the Lord. When he talks about, so that you may not be sluggish, but imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promise. That you stick it out to the end. Abraham not perfect. You and I not perfect in our walk. But generally speaking, Abraham held on with faith and patience, right? To the end. He abided in that oath, that promise that God made to him. And God made an oath and a promise to you that if you put your trust in Jesus, you will be with him in that day when he returns. That you will stand in the presence of God. And then the whole host of everyone else who entrusted themselves to the Lord, just like Abraham. And we owe Abraham the honor of being the one to have this oath covenant, this faith covenant with God, on which Paul explains at great length if you've listened to the Romans section that we taught, that he is the example and essentially the framework through which all faith is given. Life is long and life is short. I just read a social media post from someone who has been doing a lot of work around politics and like not a political pundit, but like somebody actually doing stuff, fighting court cases and getting stuff out in the public that has been buried, and doing good stuff, right? Person who's received a lot of conflict in his life for that kind of work. And this person who most people know for that kind of work also know that this person has a very public faith in Christ, is unashamed of the gospel, totally willing to put himself out there, both for a secular sense, his work with politics and information, but also willing to not hide his faith. And this person, who, like us, is waiting for that hope, that oath that God made to Abraham to be fulfilled, waiting patiently, shared today that he wouldn't be doing his podcast because his dad passed away, lost his parent. And he was open about how his dad had faith and probably would have advised him to keep teaching the stuff that and doing the stuff that he's doing, because his dad valued the work that his son was doing, didn't want anything to stop that, even his own death. But his son decided to go ahead, despite that, to honor his dad by taking a day and honoring him and doing some things that were not a part of his mission. His father, and perhaps many of you have lost parents or, people you're close to, that were waiting, that patiently endured, waiting for the fulfillment of this oath that God made to you when you put your trust in him, in his son. And you've seen those people see that fulfillment. What an example for us. I think of a friend who lost her mom. I lost my dad. I don't know if you've lost people who may have ascribed some faith in God or not. But I know that if you're listening to this and you're putting your trust in Jesus, you're waiting patiently. And that there is a day coming. And we are reminded that when people pass. When all your opportunity that you have in this earth to walk the walk, choose not to walk away from the path, but to walk the path, to do the good stuff because you love and want to honor your God. That those opportunities are limited. And although life is long, it's short. Right? We have a limited amount of opportunities. Some of you have phones or watches or athletic bands that you wear that count your steps, pedometers, and measure some of your heartbeats and all that. Some of you measure, your workouts or whatever. Isn't it interesting that God has, in a way, the counter set to know how many steps you'll ever take, how many beats of your heart will ever beat. He'll know how many times your heart got up over 120 for a workout and how many times it didn't. God has all the stats on our life, and they are limited in this world. And Abraham waited patiently. He waited patiently for the fulfillment of that promise, that oath that God made by himself. So I want to finish on this. The buck stops here. God didn't have anyone hire, and we talked about that, how we use these euphemisms, these colloquial sayings, talk about appealing to higher authorities or co-signing with people. But I want to talk about it in this sense. When people are wrestling with your faith, and they're like, yeah, okay, but what's before God, right? What comes after God? Or what's beyond God? And you're like, nothing. God is God. Okay, in one sense, you can understand why that's frustrating to somebody. Because they want a source. They want something to reference that will back up the saying that you're giving. God does that through a number of ways. That's why he gave prophets testimonies of what would come and things that did come. Things that that person in that time could not know in their own right would happen, that God promised would through them, and then later, sometimes years, decades, hundreds of years, did in fact come around to be in only the way that they could happen. God did that through a number of things for the people of Israel, for all of us, through the birth and death and life of Christ, birth and life and death of Christ, resurrection. God prophesied and told us and showed that the one who is beyond all things knows how all things work, when and where and how. So God can testify to us of his nature. But if you look at our passage, in him testifying and can appeal to no greater one than himself, you and I ultimately, there is no one greater that we can appeal to in our own personal trust and faith than God. And we don't have a link to click to go get a reference to justify God, because he's the last link. He's the last reference. There is no one else to appeal to. There's no more Wikipedia links. He's it. And there are incredibly basic, foundational, wonderful truths which the Hebrew writer referenced us. Remember? The milk, the basic food. And then there are incredibly depth, complicated tools and understandings in the Bible. And then there is the unseen, unheard, unknown, yet to be revealed components of who God is that exist right now and have always been, that you and I do not have access to nor know yet. And this is that void of lack of knowledge or understanding, or the yet fulfillment of our faith, the yet confidence of our hope, that we, like Abraham, wait patiently for. So there is a part that is referenced, a promise of coming, a God who references himself as the final reference, the final authority, that we cannot in any way usurp or say, oh, hey God, could you reference someone greater than yourself so that I can have someone to justify my referencing of you? There's no one greater. It's him. And so that can leave kind of a question mark in your heart. That can leave a little bit of a, oh, well, I don't know yet. But I know, but I don't know. But I know, but I don't know. And somebody can poke at you for that. this is that discernment. When you have come to know Jesus, when you come to know the Father through Christ, and have God's Holy Spirit living now within you because you put your trust in God, there is an assuredness of faith that you know the Lord, and yet we wait for the fulfillment of that oath. He who went, our high priest, Jesus, from this earth up through the heavens, will return in the same way he left. And I can't wait for that day, but I'm going to. All right. Till next time, keep walking. God bless you. Bye-bye.